an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Well, hello. How are you now? Yeah, just checking in. People often look at me sideways when I say, how are you now? Except for John Wright. He just says, you sound like you come from the Ottawa Valley. But I mean, really, think about it. How are you now? Right now. I mean, 10 minutes ago doesn't matter. 15 minutes from now, it don't matter. How are you right now? Pretty good. Good to hear. Me? I'm okay. I'm okay. Dave Trafford here. It's Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Welcome in. Yeah, it's busy week. Busy week. Man. I think I'm still getting over the, hit the ground running after a long vacation. I'd never taken 4 weeks off before in my life. Right? Maybe when I was 12. But then, got into high school and start working for the summer, so you weren't taking time off. You were working. But yeah, found it was kind of this adjustment just to get your legs under you. Everybody else, of course, on the team running full speed ahead. By now, we've launched the Echo North Bay edition, Echo Community Podcast Network in North Bay. Up and running and kicking ass, I'm telling you. Wow. I did a bit of an audit on the shows that we've got going there. Pretty cool. If you don't think that there is a local media desert in communities across this country, you're wrong. And I can tell you that because I looked at the numbers. There is really this thirst, a need for that connectivity in community, period. I was having this conversation with folks yesterday. We're focusing on small, medium-sized markets. But I had a chat yesterday, and we were talking about how Scarborough now is left out of the media ecosystem because the Metroland papers have kind of dried up and gone away. And the question then was, okay, so how does the Rotary Club tell its story in a very local way in Scarborough, for example? How do they do that? They used to rely on, things like the Scarborough Mirror. Not anymore. So it's not just the small markets. It's community right across the country that is suffering because of this lack of attention by local media to what's going on in the community. And I say that because when I looked at the numbers for our flagship podcast in North Bay, it's called To North Bay with Love. More than half of the downloads on that show in the first month are coming from the local website. The local website. Yeah, some of them are coming from Apple and Spotify. That's how people listen. But the local community in North Bay is going to that site because there's not just a podcast there. We have a newsletter. We've got other podcasts, other stuff that's going on. They want to know what's clicking in their community. What are people talking about? Right? And it's kind of cool. And we can actually geolocate the devices that are downloading the shows. 46% of them are in North Bay. Now, there's no borders around podcasting, right? Wherever you're listening to this show, you can go and find To North Bay with Love and listen wherever you want, right? Period. So it's not specific to a market per se. But these early numbers suggest to me that there is a market, North Bay, and that's just one example, that desperately is looking for connection to their own community. And we're not talking about, there are some City Hall stories, of course, that are popping up in the newsletter, but these are how you live in North Bay feel to it. Good local community conversation reporting, right? It's good fun. So I was really pleased with that. All good fun. But in my inbox, speaking of newsletters, I subscribe to way too many. I don't know about you. But anyhow, I've got one email address specifically set up just for my newsletters. And one of them, you'll be shocked to know, is called Pod News, your daily briefing for podcasting and on demand. And if you're into podcasting, you want to subscribe to this, Pod News. Maybe you already do. And their top story is based on research done by Acast, which is a company that specializes in podcasting. So let's just keep that in mind. But when they did their research, they found that podcasters are the most trusted media personalities in the United States. Second most trusted are YouTubers. And what they did was they asked questions around endorsements. So, for example, which of the following types of media personalities do you actively make time in your schedule to consume content from? 64% said podcasts. 33% said radio station hosts. Which of the following types of people in the media industry have you listened to for a product endorsement before? 75% podcasters. 70% YouTubers. Radio station hosts, 55%. So it's interesting to see how that has sort of shifted. And it kind of falls in line with your behavior as a podcast listener. You are more likely, when you listen to a podcast, to pay attention to a host-read ad or something that is, doesn't disrupt the show, for example, the way a commercial does on the radio. So it was pretty interesting to see how all of this is working out. So I shared that with the team just so that they know that the podcast hosts top on the list of trusted folks in the media. Now, that might be a pretty low bar because there's not a lot of trust to go around these days, but we'll take the wins wherever we get them. Well, as we've mentioned often on the program, we do a whole slew of shows at Story Studio Network, and one of them, that is the latest series wrapping up right now, I think the last 12th of the series wraps up next week, the 25th, something like that. It's One Click to Cyber Chaos, and of course it's sponsored by the folks at Coding for Veterans, and a lot of the people who come into their program at the University of Ottawa are veterans who are transitioning from military career into a civilian career, and the program allows them to get up to speed on a coding degree, and if it's self-run, so self-directed, they can do it remotely, and they can get it accomplished in about 10 months. Now, it's pretty intense. Some people take a couple of years, which is, sort of par for the course. But the cool thing about this, a lot of them, because of their background, are focused on cybersecurity. So they're lining up and they're getting the jobs, and there are plenty of them out there. And it has become sort of this, I think there's a level of awareness around cybersecurity that we haven't seen, and a lot of that was amplified by the war in Ukraine. Certainly, I know there's a whole cybersecurity question and how the war is being facilitated in the Middle East right now around cyber, etc. So this month being Cybersecurity Month, Jeff and Kim and the folks at Coding for Veterans are rolling out the final episode. So if you haven't had a chance to listen in, check it out. It's One Click to Cyber Chaos. But this came across my desk, I guess, Thursday or Friday of last week, and I thought, okay, this is an interesting angle on the whole issue of cybersecurity, whether it's your business or whether you're at home. And I think a lot of the focus lately has been, of course, on a lot of the natural disasters that we have faced, and whether it's related to climate change or whatever it happens to be, whether it's flooding, whether it's the wildfires that we saw certainly across the country, everything is intensified. And the idea here that when we face these weather-related catastrophic severe storm disasters, that it actually puts your cyber security at risk, that there is an opportunity there for the cyber bad guys to kind of get into your system and to take advantage of the disaster while you are otherwise distracted. MarHubbard is the Senior VP of IT for First On Site, and their whole suite of services, kind of deals with that first responder reaction to standing up communities and institutions and so on. But this idea, Mark, that if we had a flood in a certain area, that somehow that compromises our cybersecurity for whether it's homes or institutions. Give me what's going on there that you've identified.
There's a couple different aspects, and thanks a lot, Dave, for having me on the show. I really appreciate coming on. There's a number of different aspects there, and you start with the corporate side of things, and when you've got a flood may impact a corporate's ability to provide the computer services, whether it's a data center that's impacted, or an office location that's impacted, and they're forced to move that location to somewhere else. Well, now they're causing disruption for the services that they're providing, whether it's an outage of some sort, or it's power grid outage. They're having to move that compute power to somewhere else, those computers to somewhere else. And as a result of that, there's disruption in the services they're providing. And so they may take shortcuts to try to bring those services up faster for their customers. They may compromise the security solutions that they've got in place protecting their environment. So there's a number of ways that organizations can be impacted by these catastrophic events that take place. And that's just on the computer side. Then you look at, from a recovery standpoint, these catastrophic situations take place. People are impacted. Individuals are impacted. And the threat actors out there will prey on the fact that there's this incident taking place, and people need help recovering. And so whether it's fraudulent GoFundMe type sites, or people that are out there saying, "Hey, we'll help you recover. Just give us this information and that information." Well, then they're taking that information and they're doing something that's not appropriate with that data, whether they're selling it or they're using it for other purposes. So there's a number of areas, a number of ways that the threat actors are taking advantage of what's going on from a climate change standpoint.
Yeah, and I guess at the heart of all of this, two things. First, and this is a theme that sort of has resonated as we've gone through our cybersecurity series, and that is we seem to often view this in the rearview mirror. We aren't thinking forward, and that's not a criticism. I think it's sort of more or less human nature right now, and we don't fully appreciate the intensity of the threat, or the security threat specifically. That's becoming, I think, a little bit more. There's more awareness around it, certainly at a corporate level. But do you still find that the C-suite's still kind of playing catch up here?
Absolutely. One of the best ways to prepare for a situation like this is, you've got your business continuity plans and your disaster recovery plans and planning for resilience and so on. But if you're not practicing your ability to respond, so you're not doing tabletop exercises around the incident response plan that you have, or you don't even have an incident response plan, you're going to be at risk when that situation happens. And from a C-suite standpoint, there's catch up happening, but there's still a pretty significant gap in understanding um, how to prepare. So there's more awareness, I think, from um, an impact standpoint, but I think there's still a gap in the preparation side of things. So, what can an organization do to better prepare for that situation? Not just putting the layers in place to protect against what's going to happen today, but what if we do have a catastrophic situation and my organization needs to respond? Do people know who to call? Do I have the right plans in place? Do I have my legal support? Do I have my media support? And does my organization know the actions they need to take?
Yeah, it sounds like an easy checklist, but that would be very specific to the operation, depending on the nature of the business. And I know there are tools out there for companies and organizations to sort of self-audit. Is that a wise thing to do?
Um, it's it, there. You can't do enough preparation, right? And so a self audit is a good place to start. I subscribe to bringing in an external partner to help that audit process and to help prepare the organization. Because you're bringing in somebody that's not really familiar with your business. You're bringing in somebody that's not familiar with the processes, and they're more likely to be able to identify gaps and holes
So you
in
want
your
them to break
plans.
your system, basically, come in and
Yep,
test the
yep,
system, right?
on a
Yeah,
couple of different
yeah,
fronts, right?
yeah.
Whether it's hacking, and the system and identifying where you've got the gaps, but also going through the processes that you've got and testing your ability to respond.
So, and the reason this kind of caught my eye and ears because in all of the conversation that we've had, and we've had everything from the wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan and so on, right down to communities being held ransomware and so on. This has not come up in terms of, as you describe it, that disruption of moving our database or our computing facilities to another site. So it's sounding to me as if I'm going to do this right, I almost have to have that redundancy built in right now so that there is no real, and I put this in air quotes, heavy movement. There is actually a minor transition in that effect.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that assessment. And again, I can't say this enough. You can't do enough preparation, right? So I have for years been of the opinion that you have to regularly test your ability to recover. Um, whether it's recovering um, your sites, recovering your infrastructure, but also targeting certain a recovery time objective and a recovery point objective. Are you able to do what you say you're going to be able to do? And that way, you can also make that commitment to the C-suite. Right? Here's our recovery time objective. Here's our recovery point objective. We've tested it on an annual basis. We have validated that we're able to recover. If we are faced with a situation where we have to move, this is what you can expect. And it helps educate the organization.
Is annually often enough though? I mean, again, I'm just the outsider looking in here, but it seems to me that every time I turn around, look at ChatGPT. Holy cow! I mean, and I realize it's a different animal, but the degree to which that has accelerated and evolved again in months and weeks, the technology gets out in front of us in a hurry.
Yeah. It would be great to do it much more than annually. And the other side of this, of course, is the cost on the business
Mm.
and the disruption on the business because, people aren't sitting around waiting for the opportunity to do a test of the recovery ability. You're actually taking people out of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that has to be balanced, right? Now, what I've also seen and what I've driven in the past is actually being able to run simultaneously from multiple locations, and that's the best solution, right? Because you're failing over on a regular basis, you're moving back and forth. It's part of your business process. And I would strongly recommend that. But again, there's a pretty substantial cost, right, associated with that, not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but also from a people standpoint.
But again, we're back to objections or reasons why it doesn't get done. It might be well intended, but we could probably save a few bucks if we pushed it out to 18 months. Or I
Yeah.
mean, and again, there's that. I won't call it willful ignorance, but it becomes this. We are aware of what's going on, but all of a sudden it's less of a priority because I need you right now to be focusing on this project.
And this is where enterprise risk management is really important. And again, it's an area that is evolving, and it's getting more awareness. And certainly in some industries, there's a lot of awareness and a lot of work done around managing the risks. But understanding that risk and accepting that risk, or awareness being raised of what that risk is, so that actions can be taken to counter the risk, and that's where the enterprise risk management programs are so important to highlight that.
Now, we're focusing here on sort of corporations, larger organizations. Is there an application or a similar concern here for the residential users?
Yeah, I was thinking about that before I was coming on this. For first on site, we're about, in Canada, we're about 50-50 right now, commercial and residential business. And certainly the perspective from a commercial standpoint is quite a bit different than from a residential standpoint. There are things that people can do to protect themselves, whether it's, kind of rudimentary networking within their homes and just best practices within their homes. From a redundancy standpoint, you can have a generator available. You can make sure. I mean, one of the things that people can do is make sure that they're backing up their computers, their phones. It's something that I think is overlooked quite a bit. There are ways that you can diversify a little bit through providers, different providers for your home internet versus your mobile. You can have generators in place. So there are certainly things you can do. I know anytime that I see somebody with a sump pump in their house, the first thing I recommend is, hey, do you have a generator? Do you have a backup?
Keep that thing going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny now, I think this has become perhaps more pronounced in the last 3 years because I am working out of home and lots of people are. I mean, I was working out of this studio before COVID, but holy cow, all of a sudden now we have converted this to a business site, and it created a whole question in terms of disruption, as you pointed out. We have moved the site to some degree. So those security issues really do apply. I think even if you're working hybrid, you might be down in the towers a couple days a week, but you're working out of the home office 3 days a week. There are security issues there that you got to be aware of.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things that we've done with first on site, just with everything that took place from a COVID standpoint, we were already very much a mobile organization. We've got people going into catastrophic situations across North America. People are away from their homes for months on end. And so from a cybersecurity standpoint, we need to make sure that, hey, if somebody's on the road for 2 months, they need access to their personal email. They need access to their family, and they need to stay connected. And so we had to put in place a fairly extensive strategy just around, okay, we need to provide them the ability to have that access, but we need to make sure that it's secured, that we've got the right pieces in place, whether it's, making sure that the laptops that they've got on the road have, anti-malware on them, that the phones are properly protected from a policy standpoint. So we had to do quite a bit to just mobilize our organization, just to make sure that we were providing a secure platform for our people.
When you say that, you talk about all of these security, issues and how they've nailed things down and make sure things are tightened down. And all of that has been top of mind, certainly during COVID. And on the other hand, I've been able to do what I'm doing from wherever I want to be almost. As long as I've got decent connections, it sounds like I'm in the next room. So the technologies have kind of grown. But the one thing I will say is all this effort on making sure that everybody's computers are secure sometimes makes it hard for me to connect with people. So we get that loop, and I have to disconnect all of whether it's a firewall or VPNs or whatever it is that people are using. So it cuts both ways. But having said that, I think we'd probably prefer that the level of security and balancing off with a level of convenience, really, and so we can get on with our lives and our business in a way that suits everybody.
Yeah, we had to do quite a bit of work within the organization just to make sure that we were providing a platform that was supportable, right? Readily supportable, and people had access to the information they had, and so we had to replace a number of the tools that we had in place, and replace them with tools that allowed us to connect in certain situations. One of the things that really did help us out as well is what Elon Musk did with the Starlink satellites, and that provided another alternative for us to provide accessibility for people that were going into catastrophic situations. And back to the impact of climate change, telecommunications shut down in areas, right? So providers weren't able to provide the access. So in trying to get information and trying to get data, it was very difficult to do that.
And of course, Starlink was a great light show at night. So if you were able to see that, it was pretty cool. Mark, thanks for this. It was an interesting conversation. Appreciate you joining us.
I appreciate it, Dave. Anytime I can do anything to help raise awareness and to just help spread the word, I'm available.
Yeah, good conversation with Mark Hubbard. And, it's important, I think, to remember that we're vulnerable on so many places. And particularly now you start talking about all the conveniences that we mentioned around, smart speakers and even smart fridges. Seriously? All of these things that are connected to the internet, right? So there's always a vulnerability point there. As our friend Ritesh Kotek will say, there's that cyber hygiene that we all have to take care of. And whether that's at home, whether it's in your banking online, whether it's, the business that you run, et cetera. So all cool things. So yes, just another plug for our show. One Click to Cyber Chaos. Probably where you'll find this show. Yep. Just, do a search, whatever app you're in. And you will no doubt land on it. And Kim Geddes hosts that show. And I'm just looking at the most recent numbers, and it's doing very well, these latest episodes. So it's good fun to see how the show has engaged. Some really cool subjects, really great guests, too, just to talk about the broad range of cybersecurity, cyber threat, cyber hygiene. Yeah, so it kind of covers all that in what is Cybersecurity Month here in October. All right, that'll do it for us here on Now and Next. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about some of the things in the news, not the least of which today, the Fed's making noise about a guaranteed income, a national program. And I know the immediate reaction is, how can we afford that? People aren't going to go to work. No. There are ways to do it. And we can't afford, in some cases, not to do it. If you really look at the numbers, it makes way more sense to spend money, government tax money, your money, my money, in making sure that people don't live in poverty. Start right there, right? Tomorrow, former Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Wynne, is going to be our guest right here on Now and Next for Story Studio Network. Now and Next is produced by Becky Coles. Our production manager is Jamie Nickerson. Audio editors are Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. And our sonic logo designer is Greg McDonald. Our executive producers are Dave and Aaron Trafford.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.